All right, this is Unit 3, and we're talking about the multiplier effect. And in order to get there, we have to talk about the concept of multipliers in general, because there's some specific ones we're going to look at. In order to do that, we have to start with the circular flow diagram. So, typical circular flow diagram, the product market, the resource market, firms and households, goods and services in the product market, resources, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. So why are we talking about this first? Well, in order to understand the multiplier effect, you have to understand what happens if you have $100. You take that $100 and you buy something with it. Well, anytime money is put into the circular flow or spent, there's a decision that's made by the person who receives that money. That person is either going to save some of that money, or all of it, or spend some of that money, or all of it. Most people are going to save some and spend some. So, whenever it's saved, we call that a leakage. Right? It gets taken out of the circular flow. Like me disappearing. The other is called spent. If it's spent, it's put back into the flow. And right now, the key to the multiplier effect is understanding what happens to the money that's put back into the flow. Well, if I have $100 and someone pays me $100 because I sold them something, I'm going to take the $100, take, let's say, 50 of it, and I'm going to put it in savings. It's gone. The other 50, I'm going to spend it on another product. And then that person has 50. And they're going to take a portion of that, gone. And they're going to spend the rest. And then whoever receives that money is going to take a portion of that and spend the rest, and so on, and so on. And that 50, that 100 becomes 50, gets put back into the economy, another maybe becomes 25, then it becomes maybe 15, then maybe 10, then maybe 5, all the way down to 0. So my $100 actually became much more money. And there's a saying you may have heard, money creates money. And that's the essential idea behind what the multiplier effect is. So let's look at it more technically. The multiplier, each dollar in economics is either spent or saved. If people save 20% of every dollar, then what's called the MPS, the marginal propensity to save, is 0.2. So therefore, 80% of that is going to be spent. They're saving 20% and they're spending 80%. So the MPS is the marginal propensity to save, and then the MPC is the marginal propensity to consume. So in this case, the MPS is 0.2, so the MPC must be 0.8. They always equal 1. So if the MPS is 0.5, that means the MPC is 0.5. If the MPC is 0.2, then the MPS is 0.8. It could be opposite. All right? So we're going to come back to this in 1 second. Look over here. This graph you may or may not see on the AP exam, but it's not that difficult, not unlike the other graphs we look at. So in this case, we'll have GDP down here, and we'll have not time, like the business cycle, but we'll have spending. So spending. So we're going to say the economy is currently spending $100 million, and the output for that, right, the GDP, the real GDP, is 100 billion. So 100 million spending leads to an output of 100 billion. All right? Here's my potential GDP, and here's my actual GDP. Okay? What happens in the economy if the economy decides to spend, whether it's the government, the Fed, or consumers, 100 million more? So I'm going to go up 100 million, about 100 million. So this is my actual GDP1, actual GDP2. This is going up 100 million. 100 million of spending. Well, how much is output going to increase? Definitely by 100 million. But because of the multiplier effect, the output is actually going to increase to here. So from here to here. Well, if we draw our lines down, this goes down to, let's say, 500 billion. So a 100 million increase from 100 to 200 million has led to an increase of 400 billion. That is called your multiplier effect. It's an exponential increase. A small increase in spending leads to a multiplied increase in output. So in this case, the multiplier was 5, right? A 100 million increase in spending leads to a $400 billion increase here. Well, I think I screwed up those numbers, but hopefully you get the idea, right? A small increase here leads to a large increase there. Now, back to the circular flow. If the government, here's an example, if the government spends $1 billion, demand, like they take money, they borrow it, whoever they get it, they spend $1 billion, the demand for all goods and services increases. Businesses hire more workers and they pay more income. In the same scenario, if the MPS, the marginal propensity to save, is 0.2, that means 80%, 0.8 of that billion is spent again in the economy. It's put back into the flow. And that goes through another cycle. And 80% of that goes back in and another cycle is created. So income, again, goes up by 80% of that, and new spending, 80% of that is spent, and so on and so on and so on. This is called the multiplier effect. A change in spending leads to a larger change in output, or in this case, aggregate demand, as we're going to do in class. There are 3 multipliers that we're going to look at, and they have different formulas. The first one is the government spending multiplier. The second one is the tax multiplier, and the third one is the money multiplier. The third one is going to be the next unit we do. So the first 2 are unit 3, and they're related. Look at a more concrete example. For the first one, I'm going to state that my example is there's going to be initial spending. It could be the government spending money. It could be the Fed Reserve spending money. All you need to know for this is that it's initial spending. This is what initially is spent. We start with $100. There's going to be, so that means 80 is going to be spent. So we know what the MPC is and the MPS. The MPS is 0.2, and the MPC, marginal propensity to consume, is going to be 0.8. So that money, $100, gets put into buying something. Let's say by the government, let's say. The government is going to spend, and that money goes to firms. The firms take that money, and they're going to hire workers, give workers income, and the workers are going to work, and they're going to create new goods, which are going to be bought and sold, and then so on and so on. The workers are going to take their income, and they're going to buy more goods, and the whole process is going to go in a cycle. So let's figure this out. We can actually figure out how much more money can be created by that initial $100 increase by looking at the MPC and the MPS. So down here we have the initial amount spent is 100. That means 80% is spent, 20% is saved. That's because I gave you that's given information. So how much is going to be the next cycle is going to be spent? Well, 80% second time around of 80 is going to be $64 is going to be spent. And then however many is left, 80 minus 64, going to be 16 is going to be saved and taken out. During the next cycle, it's going to be $64 is going to be the initial. And then 80% of that, 51.20, subtract these two, now 12.80 is going to get saved. And so on. Now $51 is going to be 80% of that is 40.96, and 10.24 of that's going to be saved. And the final one I have here is 40, then 32, then 8. Now, this keeps going, right? I could keep doing this, making little boxes, 80% of the initial, and then save all the way down. But you don't have to do that because we figured out something called the multiplier formula. To know if you keep doing this, what your number would actually wind up being. So the government spending multiplier, because we said that the $100 was government spending. So in order to find the multiplier, an easy way to figure out that total number we're adding up is to take 1 over the MPS equals, so we had what? The MPS in the previous answer was 0.2. So 1 over 0.2 gives me a multiplier of 5. Then it's easy. Once you get the multiplier, the government spending multiplier is the initial spending, which was $100, times 5. So 100 times 5 gives me a $500 increase in real GDP output. So it saves me the trouble of having to create a box like this and to add up all of these numbers. So initial spending was 100. It actually leads to a $500 increase in real GDP output. How do I know? I use the formula for government spending formula. All right, I'm going to do more of this in the next video, but I'll leave you with this. There's 2 ways to get this formula. It's 1 over the MPS, or it's 1 over 1 minus the MPC. Okay, and that's the same number, so you would have gotten 1 over 1 minus 0.8, which gives you 1 over 0.2, which again gives you 5. And this, of course, is the government spending multiplier. That's the first one done. All right, next video, I'll go over this again, and I'll go over the other formula, the tax formula.